luck with it.
I'm going to talk a little bit. My name is Ted Hill, and I've been keeping top bars. Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah, how did that happen? I've been keeping bees in top bar hives and also in Moray and Langsford for about 5 years now, so I'm just a baby beekeeper. I'm really bad. Just a bad beekeeper. Yeah, it takes about the 3rd year before you get to be a bad beekeeper. But part of what will make your decision as to what kind of equipment you get is cost and ease and whether or not you have a table saw and bandsaw sitting out in the garage, and your philosophy of why you're keeping bees, okay? And possibly also what shape your back is in, whether you want to make money for honey. I mean, I would never for a minute quarrel with Jerry. First of all, he's been keeping bees forever, and he knows more about it than I ever will, probably. He's already 60, God's sake. And the other thing that I look at is that he keeps bees because he is trying to get honey off of them. And I keep bees because I want to keep bees, and honey is nice, okay? And philosophically, why you keep bees and that sort of thing will determine what kind of equipment you get, okay? So, what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about natural comb. Now, all of the stuff that we've seen here before has had what's called foundation in it. And if you watch closely, foundation was either plastic or wax with an embossed hexagonal pattern in it. So it sort of looked like a little bitty board game. Okay? And that embossed hexagonal pattern, the bees would use very reliably to make the size cells that you told them to. Now, the Langsford hive was invented in essentially the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when all was for the best and the best of all possible worlds, and bigger bees must be better bees, and on and on. And what was done was the cell size compared to normal bees was artificially expanded a little bit, okay? And some people think that's a bad thing, because what it does is it forces the bees to make a little bit bigger bees. And it makes the cycle a little bit longer, and on and on. And you can get into a great many arguments, and it's really not worth it. And we don't like to argue in this club because we all want to keep bees, and that's a lot more fun. So what we do is we say there are people who keep bees on natural comb. And natural comb, as I have sort of implied, you start with this, an empty nothing, and you get a whole bunch of comb. Bees will do this all by themselves, as if by magic, and they will draw a comb with the size cells that they see fit. Okay? This is in some ways good because the bees get to choose, and in some ways bad because if you think drones are a bad thing, the bees do not agree with you, and they will make between 15 and 30% of their cells will be drone comb. Okay? And the drones don't make any honey, so they must be bad things. And we know they're guys, and you know guys are bad things. On and on. So you insert the usual argument here. So you can keep any kind of these hives with natural comb. It's all a matter of whether or not you're going to give them a pattern or not. Okay? So you can take a regular Langsford frame. Okay, we've seen these. Here we got a nice, oh, there's a nice virtual one here. Okay, untouched by human hands. Okay, you can take this guy, you can pop out this plastic crap and throw it away or give it to the chickens, they won't even eat it. And you can basically glue popsicle sticks in the top of here, or tongue depressors or whatever. And the bee, and you put this in your hive, and the bees, not being stupid, will figure out that they're supposed to draw comb there, and they will draw it there, and they will draw comb on your frames, okay, and it will be the size that pleases them. And you will have a lot more drones than you would have otherwise. And perhaps the bees will be happier. I've never actually gotten them to fess up whether they are or not. So, hard to say. I'm happier, you know. So someone's got to be pleased by the process.
Just make sure it's level.
Yes.
Do you still need the wires?
You don't. You can put the wires in, actually. I thought about doing that. Yes.
Has anyone done any studies? If you have a prepared foundation and they make fewer drones, does that help or hinder the survival of the hive?
They've done tons of studies. Unfortunately, they haven't. It's really, really hard to determine. There are so many variables. You'll find in beekeeping that answering that question would require you to hold so many things steady that you cannot hold steady that you would never know. And so the argument will never stop. That hive has been redesigned to be a screen bottom board hive. I have solid hives with screen bottom board. Some people will swear up and down that you gotta have a screen bottom board, your bees are gonna die, okay? I find it doesn't make a bit of difference. There's no real way to tell because there are so many variables. You don't have the same hive, you don't have the same queen. One hive may get more sun, one may not. One may be in the place where the wind comes in. It's really hard to tell. There are those who say that natural comb allows the bees to be more resilient and more resistant to diseases. There are those that say that is hogwash. Okay, so you can, as you are probably finding out, and if you look on the web, you'll find out even more. Every beekeeper represents 4 to 8 opinions on almost any given thing about how you raise bees. That's why it remains a uniquely personal way. That's why we have so many people in here keeping bees, because we all do it so differently. But you can do natural comb and Langstroth, and it works just fine. You can do natural comb. The moray hive, this little guy here, is sort of like a standing up hollow log as opposed to a laying over hollow log like that top bar hive is. And it looks, for all the world, like a Langstroth hive, because it came after him, with one notable and important difference. Frames all just basically come to a point here. And so rather than having frames, you have bars, and they draw their comb. And as you can see below, if the window is open, that they draw their comb and they stick it right up against that window. Now, if you want to see what the bees are doing, windows are the bomb, okay? They are really cool. There is nothing like going out at 1 o'clock in the morning in February when it is 18 degrees Fahrenheit, opening up the window on your hive and saying, yeah, they're still in there, they're a cluster, they're tiny as heck, but they're still there. And then shut the window and going home. Or going in August at 1 in the morning, or maybe a little earlier. I always like to go before I go to bed. Going in and saying, okay, here's the real strength in my hive because all the field force is in. Or saying, okay, and it's easier to do this on a glass on the worktop plastic. You can run your hand along the one and say, okay, there's where the brood nest is because that's where it's the warmest on the outside. So you have to just stick the thermocouple down there. Okay? Or having open a hive. It's really nice to be able to do some level of inspection beyond just looking in the front hole without having to open the hive. Okay? It may tend to make you lazier, though I won't. I don't want to go. They're all fine. Life's good at that. Okay. But anyway, this hive, the moray hive, is an 8-frame hive. And you can also get 8-frame Langstroths too. Generally they're a special order, but they're a little lighter. If you just don't think you can manage a 10-frame hive, a guy that's that wide, get a guy that's a little, get a guy that's about maybe 20% narrower, so a little easier to deal with. These guys, you stack them. Now these guys are kind of interesting. One of the things that Ouray made these and called them the people's hives, because anybody can keep them, was the idea. And what he looked at was, he said, if you look at a tree, when bees build a hive, they build it from the top and they build it down, okay? So the canonical way to deal with a Ouray hive is not to super it when you want honey, but to basically sub it when you want honey. So you have the brood nest on the top, you stick additional boxes underneath, and you pull them off as you get honey. Some people take that hive and so super it because they enjoy doing it that way, okay? Basically, what we use nowadays is really a modified Ouray hive because he nailed in his things and everything. They're a little harder to manage because if you need to take the bar out, it is very, very thoroughly attached to the side, and you'll need a special tool. For both the top bar and for the Ouray hive, you'll need some sort of tool that can do this. That can go down beside a piece of comb and free it from the window. You can stick your tool in like yo. This is my Ouray one hand. Go down in, which is no sound. And go next to it and then basically scrape that thing clear to get this guy off of there. The bees don't appreciate that. You have to be very, very dainty with it, okay? It's possible to do in the top bar. And something that Jerry said over and over again, and I will reiterate, is listen to your bees, pay attention to your bees. Smoke them down. If they appear to be annoyed, smoke them down again. If they really are not having it, okay, and if you're not in a situation where you must deal with 50 hives today or you're going to go broke, if your backyard hive is in an ornery mood and they don't want to hear from you, just leave them alone. But listen, watch the bees, okay? We've had people come in and just slam things around and smash bees and not care. The bees figure it out. There's a pheromone that they actually emit when you smash one next to it. I call it the "you kill my sister" pheromone. They do begin to notice if you keep on smashing bees, and they'll know who you are when you come back. So listen to your bees. Try to avoid killing them. In addition to the fact that they don't want an abattoir in their living room any more than you do with a bunch of dead bee parts down there, they also do not want to have their sisters killed in their presence, okay? So don't do that. Be careful. Yes?
Is there a best time of the day to do that? If you're going to scrape the windows nighttime, first thing in the morning?
I would never do anything to the hive at nighttime because at nighttime everybody's a bit. And the bees will respond accordingly. Mid-afternoon.
Doesn't matter?
Yeah, when the bees, one of the easiest things to do is if a lot of bees are flying out, work it when they're out, because those are the ornerier of the bees. Okay, the nurse bees are pretty calm. For a while, I can't even sting. It's very nice. So I would do that. I try to do my hives in the early afternoon. I try not to do them when it's not raining and things like that. You don't always get that choice. Sometimes you just got to do things. It's like any agricultural thing. You can get slack, okay? You can let the chickens go a day without being fed if they're able to get scratched and find bugs in the ground. Ultimately, you may have to deal with a casualty or an emergency. And so sometimes you just got to go in. Just try to minimize the gotta's. All right. So we talked about Langstroth. Moray is in a lot of ways sort of in between a Langstroth and a top bar because the top is a lot like a Langstroth. I mean, you got all these holes and things like that. And all of the things that they have you do, you know, where they say, put something on top of the bar, you know, on top of the frames in the hive. You know, that works fine here. This will work just like it will in a Langstroth. I'll show you why in the top bar that doesn't work so well. And we will go on. So, like Moray, a lot like Langstroth, but smaller and generally natural comb. I suppose you could make frames. I mean, if you can make frames, you can put them in there and you just have a little bitty Langstroth hive. Top bar hive, okay. What happens if I push the magic button? Yes, okay. The idea is all the bees decide what size the cell make. The beekeeper must still be able to harvest the honey, inspect the bees, etc. Part of the requirements for making a hive is that you can do this to your comb to see if it has disease on it, okay? That's why you can't use skeps except for educational purposes because you can't individually look at the pieces. The top bar will let you do that. This is called a Kenyan top bar hive, and it has the slanted sides because the slanted sides look enough like the bottom that the bees will not attach their comb to the sides very hard. Okay, they will attach it. You can see a little attachment point here and here. When you go into a top bar hive, we can talk about that in detail. You have to make sure that that's clear before you pull it out. Because on a nice warm day, you'll come up with a bar, the comb will fall in, and everyone will be unhappy. The idea is, though, that you start with this, with a bar, and the bees draw their comb. And they draw it the size they want, or whatever reason they want. So if they're decent or not. Okay, the thing about a top bar hive is, if it is well designed and functioning properly, you will have a follower board. Okay, guess which side the bees are on. And the follower board is the imaginary back of the hive. This allows you to control the space, which can be useful when you start out a colony, for example. You want the brood nest, here's the door. See this or not. The entrance is right here. It's like this one, it's about a little half-inch high and a little landing board. So what they've got is, they come in here. You want the brood nest near here, so the honey is near there, okay? If the brood nest shows up in the middle, and they got honey on both sides, they don't split. So half of their honey basically doesn't exist. And things can begin to get complicated if you let the brood nest get too far back. So basically, but when you first start one of these guys out, like I would start this out, I would basically start it out exactly like this with the follow-up board with everybody on the side and let them get established here. Okay. The thing you'll note is that the top is completely sealed. They will very quickly propolize all of the bars to one another and to the top, okay? And so every single time, just like a Langstroth, you will have to go in and you have to pry these guys apart. Additionally, if you go right in the middle here because you want to look at this guy and you pull it out, you are going to squash some bees, okay? You'll roll them, you'll kill them, you'll make them very unhappy. You have to start, just as in a langswith, away from where the highest concentration is. So you usually break this loose, and you begin to have to manage the space in between these bars to get to where you want, get a guy out. In a lot of ways, the top bar will require more attention from you to what the bees are doing. Are the bees angry? Are the bees upset? Are you squishing them? If you don't pay attention while you're closing these bars together, this is a bee squishing machine par excellence, okay? And just as the final finish, you'll squish one here, okay, you won't quite get it closed, your fingers are right there, the unhappy bee is right here, you can figure out the solution. Because, you know, as has been indicated, you want to try to minimize the use of gloves until they're unavoidable. So, that's sort of how the top bar works. What the top bar offers you that the langswith does not is a sealed top that is very thermally insulated. All the comb comes up to the top, they have space to move. The top is sealed off, air can't escape that way. And the problem is that neither can you put anything on top of it and expect it to get into the hive. So there are problems. The entire United States beekeeping is based on making money and using this kind of hive. So every time you use that kind of hive, even though it's becoming more popular, you have to basically do your homework and figure out, okay, how can I modify that? Can I modify that? Can you do a sticky board number? Can you slip a piece of paper in there with Vaseline on it and catch the mites and take them out? It's really hard to do it unless you have a screen bottom board. It's hard to get to the mites. Things are harder that way. But the bees, they really seem to like it. That's my experience. And the other thing about this type of hive is, while this one was exorbitantly expensive to make because it was made with, you know, real fancy wood and all kind of crap, you can make functional hives like this out of 55-gallon drums. You can use the crap lumber that's lying out behind the shed that you really don't like anymore. The reason this is called the Kenya top bar hive is because we basically began to repopularize it in Africa, where they don't have a jig for cutting finger joints like you need for that guy and fancy saws and a lot of jazz. Well, they have a lot of flat lumber. You can take flat boards, you can take something that isn't as fancy as this guy, you just basically run something down the middle and you can put it in and you'll have bars and a box and a hive and it will be going. You don't have to put it in a window. And you can basically heat bees without having to have the necessary fancy shop stuff that you need to have for a langswith. That being said, they're hard to come by unless you build one yourself. They're expensive and the shipping is expensive too. So if you know, there's beautiful gold star bees out in Maine somewhere. She makes beautiful hives. They have their own stand. They're marvelous. They're $300, and then you get shipped them. Yes.
What kind of wood did you use?
That's plain old clear white pine. Expensive, Lowe's, clear, straight grain. Yeah.
How does it handle the heat buildup and the moisture?
I have found that the bees are perfectly capable of ventilating that hive completely to their specifications.
It's sealed at the top. How
Yep.
is it ventilated?
They flap their little wings and magic things occur. And you can see it on the glass, because what you'll see is you'll have bees in this part, it'll be bone dry and warm. And back here, it will be foggy, okay? I've had a situation where I had bees normally all over the glass. The bees on glass is one of the levels of how full this thing is. And then some nights, when they had a different ventilation pattern, they would bring the air in and along the window, and then it would go down somewhere, and there wouldn't be a single bee on the window, and the window would be freezing cold, and the bees would all be on the comb. I don't think that if we have reasonable sized colonies, and we keep our temperatures within a reasonable specification, and reasonable specification is what the Northwest is all about, man. I don't think that we have a problem with the bees being able to control ventilation, okay? You know, I can get in a fight over that, but realistically, I've had those with screen bottom boards, I had them without, it doesn't even matter. The bees are very competent at ventilating, okay? Sometimes late at night, you come out to those and you're trying to flush out the right way when they're making honey, and you can see water vapor coming out of them and just going up. It's just amazing. It puts the smells around. So I do not find ventilation a problem. I find that if you have a really, really cold time, the heat retention is really good on these. But you have this, and you have this guy on top of it, And what I usually have is one of those 1/4 inch thick aluminized plastic mica thing, you know, it's basically insulation. And in the summertime, I put it on the outside because it reflects the sun, and keeps it a little cooler. In the wintertime, I set it on top of the bars, top on, and that's a little bit more heat retention. Yes?
The one, we built one, my
Yeah.
neighbor and I, with the design, but it had the entrance in the middle
Uh-huh.
of the side, not
Yep.
on the end. And so I guess that just, you gotta manage that one a little differently.
Yeah, I don't know how that turned out in terms of where you could put the brood and whether or not you have to fight, you know, that sort of thing. A lot of it is basically where they go and where you put the follow boards and like that. If you have a double end, if you have a really long one, that hive is the size of a single deep, okay? So remember, the basic idea of a laying straw is you put 2 deeps on, and that's their brood chamber, okay? You're never going to get as big a buildup in this hive as you do in 2 deeps. It's not going to happen, not enough square inches of comb. So when we do the beekeeping in the Northwest class, I talk about the exact square inches of comb in that hive versus a deep versus a western versus an 8 frame. And you can do the math yourself, it's not that hard, and you find that's about the size of the deep. So you're looking at a smaller hive. You are not going to make money with honey, okay? And you're going to get honey out if you need it.
So what kind of honey would you get from that? I mean, is that enough to just want personal use? or-
That's enough for personal use, yeah. And again, it's an agricultural thing. It depends on the year. Last year, lots of honey. Okay, you know, if you were trying to get honey, you couldn't miss. Okay. Year before last, it wasn't squat. It was bad. It really in Kitsap County, there are not a lot of sources. Okay. If you want to be successful, you move your hives around, or you find a place where you're next to some sort of agricultural concern that's raising something that's successful. Because remember, what goes on in your backyard doesn't matter. The bees can fly 8 miles, and 3 miles. Okay, they can fly 3 miles, and if you do the calculation, it's about 18,000 acres, I think. If you do a mile, it's 8,000 acres. So what really matters is the 8,000 acres around your hive, not what's in your backyard. Everything is going to be dealt with in your backyard. I mean, even our cats set fruit, crying about it. They will fertilize everything in the yard, okay? But what they need to survive is many millions of blooms. Many millions of blooms. And so those are going to be further out. Okay, you know, and now, you know, when I drive down, I live back behind the Safeway in central Kitsap, and I drive down Pine Road and I see what's blooming and stuff like that. Okay, all the faux fruit trees are blooming. Okay, that's great for pollen. Okay, big leaf maples, not a peep. Okay, because that's a nectar source. Okay, so now I know what's going on. The stuff around you matters more than the stuff that's immediately around the hives. Question?
Are there any certain kinds of flowers, blooms that would actually create poisonous honey?
The only poisonous honey that I have a record of is rhododendron honey, which was from Turkey, and it is mostly anecdotal information. Bees do not like rhododendrons. They're too deep. Bumblebee bees adore them. I have never known anyone to be killed by any honey that has been done around here. You might talk to folks in Brennan. There's a big rhododendron place there. But no, I don't think there's anything particularly poisonous that the bees can bring in terms of natural stuff that they would do that I've ever heard of. Like I say, that story about the poisonous honey in Turkey is kind of anecdotal. Other questions?
Is there any information as to whether, in terms of volume of honey that you would get, natural comb compared to foundation comb?
I think that the method by which you get honey in a foundation comb hive like this is always going to supersede that. I don't think there's a difference. I know that what really controls it is how good your nectar source is and how much space they have. They will jam honey in every hole they can if they need to. As a matter of fact, it becomes an issue. If there's a lot of stuff coming in, but they don't have a lot of space, they'll get what's called honey bound, where they keep on putting nectar in the holes where the queen wants to lay, so she can't lay anymore, and then she can't lay, and then they're running out of trouble with that. Heck with a swarm, and then there you go. So that doesn't really seem to be a concern. It's just the method by which these are managed is more successful for honey.
So for the top bar style here, you actually pull combs throughout the summer then?
If you had a nectar, if you were living next to an alfalfa field, I never had the problem here. I got close with the blackberry last year. But what you would do is you would manage it bar by bar. You pull a bar of honey, you basically put in a bar of, something nearby, you move the comb around as necessary and decide how invasive you want to be with the process of moving combs for that matter. But basically, yeah, you would take it comb by comb, and that's part of the benefit is you don't have to yank off a 75-pound honey super and destroy your back because you're not really moving that hive. The other thing is you want to have that hive up like that. I gave George a hard time because he put a top bar hive out in our apiary, and he put it down on a Langswood thing, so he had to get down and beg before it. It was really, I said, George, put it higher. What the heck? What? Yes.
My old grandfather picks up honey stuff, I don't know how he does it, I can't do it. What can a lady beekeeper do? I mean, is there like a...
I was directed by my wife to make those because she was not going to be yanking any 75-pound. I told her I was going to have nothing to do with stinging insects, and that didn't turn out as well. Does that answer your question? Yes.
Why do they tell you to start with 2 hives?
Because if one fails, you're going to be crestfallen. You may never come back again. But if one fails, if you have another one, it's not quite so bad. Also, you get to compare how they behave. Okay, you first.
So, since these are so far off the ground typically and things I've seen, does that affect the temperatures of the bees or anything during the winter?
Doesn't seem
So it
to.
doesn't, so
No.
closer to ground,
No.
how does that?
I mean, if you had a serious wind issue, you might need to deal with it, but it just keeps it away from the things on the inside. Yes.
Is the way you extract the honey different from this?
Oh yes. If you are seriously doing these guys, you can put it into a centrifugal extractor. You basically scrape the caps of the honey so the honey can come out. You spin the thing spins. You set them out so their 7-degree angle thing does its thing, and the honey comes out, and life is good. You take it out and you put them back in. The bees clean it up. Life is good. So those guys, the term is crush and strain, which we have used for thousands and thousands of years. Whereby you take the comb, you cut it off, you take your favorite potato mash, go crunch it, put it in a paint bag or whatever, and take the honey out. Do this in a warm room, away from the bees.
Is it any different?
Go ahead.
Any different with the solar extract? If you make a solar,
That's a wax melter. Okay, you'll get a bunch of wax at the end of this, and you can put it in your solar wax melter.
okay.
Questions? Other questions? Yes.
All right, let's ask one more thing. Jerry's talking about he had a neighbor that complained about him. What if your neighbors spray some of your bees? Can they bring that back? Does that affect
Oh,
the
yes.
hive?
We have had poison kills in Kitsap County. And their neighbors and their use of glyphosate and whatever the hell else they find, spraying it on the blackberries right as they bloom will kill your bees. So you need to talk to your neighbors if you're going to keep bees and say, dudes, if you want to kill the blackberries, don't spray them when they're blooming. Okay, don't spray them at all, really. Now the nice thing is, and since you're a member of the club, I know Brandy will get her in when at some point, usually in late summer. The woman who is the noxious coordinator, Dana Coggin, will come and talk to us about weeds because she and we have a very close relationship in terms of making sure she does not spray things while the bees are on them. So while she hates knotweed and I love it, we have an agreement that basically if you have knotweed and it's in an area that's not, what's the word, near a stream, riparian, there we go. She will basically leave it be while the bees are on it, and she's very, very conscious of that process. And what she is trying to do is get us to make a Google map of where our hives are so she knows. So when her crews go out, she can say, do not spray over here on this side of the dwelling because there's a guy with hives. Okay? But yes, spraying and killing bees is not that hard to do. And you gotta watch your folks. Yeah.
On the war and the hive, is it also the crush and?
For any kind of natural comb honey, you're going to be doing crush and strain. Because what makes that so you can do it without crushing and straining is having the wires in it and having that support, spine in the center. Makes it very strong.
So, when the club has the equipment, do you take your things down or do you borrow and check out the equipment?
Oh boy, I believe you borrow, check out the extractor. The extractor is about the size of an old washing machine, if you remember the way they used to put the ringer on the top, and it doesn't have the ringer. Might be handy, actually. So it's a checkout piece of gear, and you really want to get trained out on it because it's relatively easy to destroy apparently. But what we would like to do is try to get together if we have a good honey run. People have like 4, or 5 frames of honey. It's like, what? Why am I going to do this? Okay, to go to borrow a truck and go down and get the thing, and then do 4 frames, and then you'll be done. And most of the honey is stuck on the inside of the thing. We're trying to get together so that we have a lot of people that have a lot of honey, will have a little honey to get together and do it all together. So we may try to do that around the picnic time in August or something. Let's see what happens. Other questions?
When they're spraying, not only killing the bees, but does that damage your honey?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Poison honey's bad.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just have a question about that Kenyan one.
Yeah.
When you crush the hives, does it, the combs, does it kill any grubs that are growing
You
into?
really want to keep the protein out of your honey if at all possible. So, and it's a problem with the top hive. There's no really good way to put a queen excluder in there without making something clever. So if you have a little bit of brood in your honey, maybe you want to cut that piece out and put it back in the hive. They're going to be very upset anyway if you take it. It is incumbent upon the beekeeper to watch out to keep the protein level down in the honey and also the bee parts and things like that. So cut out any comb. And if you have a bar of honey and it has like a quarter of it's full of brood, maybe you ought to leave that for the bees because they're going to need honey just like they do in these guys. Okay. One of the things that is a standard technique with top bar is not to harvest until the spring. Okay. I will look at my hives when we get big leaf maple and see if any of them have enough honey that it's worth taking out and actually dealing with. So we'll see. Yes?
When did you worry about the corals and the mites? Is there a time of year that more?
Spring, summer, fall, or winter. Mostly. Spring and summer and fall and winter. That gets into a philosophy of whether or not you worry about varroa, and if you worry about it, what you do about it. And so that's a very, very complex issue that I'm not going to try to address here, so that because there's way too many people close to the door. But there's usually a natural beekeeping, all right, treatment-free beekeeping conference down in Oregon. I think it will be 2016 this year. Yes, someone here. Yes.
I did. Bremerton has got a new policy. They're going to start spraying biphosphate on all the sidewalks on the arterials in Bremerton. So I'm not sure how we deal with that with the weeds.
That's a bad thing.
Policy starting next month.
Wow.
It's in the papers. If anybody has a problem with it, I contact
Well, I was
Bremerton.
asking, I heard something about spraying.
Wow.
Would that hurt with it?
Wow.
And this is a Dana Coggin thing.
I will talk to Dana. I mean,
Yeah.
she's county.
She's written a 69-page procedure for doing this.
I'll still talk to her about it. I know that she looks at spraying as a weapon of last resort because she's an integrated pest management kind of person,
But unfortunately, our public works just wants to kill weeds.
exactly. And possibly else. We won't go there, that's it. Other questions? Yeah.
Is there a website that mentions a schedule of spraying or?
No, you get in your car and drive around. I mean, in terms of what the bees are doing, what's
No,
moving where?
when the county spray, do they put out, is there like a-
If you go to Kids Have Noxious Weeds on Facebook, she's pretty clear about when she's spraying and where. Yeah, way in that.
We've got about a dozen yellow jacket, nests in our, salons.
Oh, yeah?
Is there a natural way to get rid of them? Or
Yes, whatever nasty poison you can find, kill them. There's not a really good way. Yellow jacket meaning the guys in the ground.
No, the ones in
The ones in the, you know what I would tell you to do is talk to the master gardeners, because they have the expertise on dealing with wasps in the overhead.
Should we wait this year to get the honey?
I would knock their nest down. See, if you're a beekeeper, you'll have a bee suit, and so you can go say, ha ha, surprise!
Just shoot it down with a shotgun.
Yeah, well, that can make a hole. Yeah.
Those yellow jacket nests in the barns, They're probably there because of the termites that come in.
Yeah,
In the summer.
yeah, leave them alone.
Yellow
What was
jackets
it? What was
eat
it?
Termites.
termites.
Yellow jackets eat termites, that's the good thing they do. They sting children and never go lawnmower, but they do eat termites. Yeah.
Most of the time too, if you just knock those nuts down early,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's spring, you're not gonna have to worry about it.
Yeah, there'll be little ones, yeah, knock them down. But yeah, that's the thing to bring up, and it's the thing to look at. I mean, yellow jackets are one of our largest pests here in terms of insects that eat bees, okay? But, if you possibly can, try to avoid killing them dead because, they do eat termites and termites will eat your house and then they sort of, what else have I got here? Okay, we talked about the Loray. The thing we don't have on our Loray, which you can't see, is the roof, which keeps it all dry and has a place for putting stuff in. We looked at that, we looked at that. Pretty colors. Now here's the top of a hive with its own stand, but the basic idea is 4 sides, about 60 degrees give or take. You can put a window in if you like. If you put a window in, make sure it's flush on the inside. If you have a top of a hive, make sure you put a window in there. Okay, here's a whole bunch of my hives and somebody else's hives too. Yep. This is flat front but sloping sides. These look like, the tool. That's the only bizarre tool you need for top bar hive is the thing that has a little hook. Like this. This one actually is for Loray. This is my fancy top bar one that George thinks should have stained glass in here so it's properly hippified, but it's quite that cool. Yeah, they're my hives. I set them on, what I did was I set them on trestles with a 2x4 across them, the first 2. The next ones I built cinder block things. Top bar hive. Make sure it is level. The bees, they know from gravity. You'll have crooked comb, like I have in that hive, because my cinder blocks have basically tilted 3/4 of an inch out of level now, and so they're a little bit of a thing. You gotta make sure they're level. These guys, they don't care. Okay, they put it on the foundation, and life is good. What other stuff? Okay, feeders. Feeders on the inside. These are my feeders on the outside. As I said, they will attract the attention of other bees. Make yourself a stand if you're doing top bar or Loray, actually, because you cannot set them down. You can't just say, go whack to get the bees off, then set it down over here. Because the first go whack, all your comb will be there, and the bees will be coming back up at you. And you can just set the broken top bar down. Yes?
On the feeding, do you feed wet or do you feed dry?
You feed wet if you can. The concentration depends on the result you want, and we really can't talk about that because it's a complicated process. In the winter, if you are in extremis, you can try to feed dry powder, dry sugar. Sometimes they'll take it, sometimes they won't. Depends.
So what's that in the bottom picture then?
The bottom picture, this is,
No, the other.
this guy? Wow, it looks like chickens and yeah, and someone stole my design for the cover. Excellent. I like those. Chickens don't seem to eat bees. They maybe eat the dead ones, but I haven't seen them do it. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Foley experts, most used type, best all-purpose, huh? We've been there, we sort of, yeah. Do we? Yeah, we don't have time, do we?
We don't have time.
Okay, we'll do spring management next week.
And just one more announcement, Stedman's called me today and said that package day is April 18th. Does everybody know what package day is?
No.
That's the day the bees come. So, and they also said that April 1st is the deadline. So if you haven't ordered your bees and you want them, call Stedman's by April 1st and April 18th will be package day.
Thank you. Do you know what their price is these days?
No,
Yeah. Thank you all so much for coming.